The search for the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers continues on, and today here on Steelers Talk, we've got the latest Steelers coaching search buzz for you guys. But before we get into all the coaching buzz and all the rumors and all that different stuff, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for daily updates on the Steelers search for their next head coach. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support, and if you guys want daily and free updates on the black and gold all throughout the offseason, this is the place for you. Click that subscribe button today. All right, so now we got kind of an unexpected name thrown into the ring here by Brian Baldinger. And Baldy says that the Steelers are, quote-unquote, very interested in Miami Hurricanes head coach Mario Cristobal. Definitely, kind of a curveball thrown in there by Baldy. This is what he had to say earlier this week. He says, not out here trying to play reporter or doing any of that nonsense, but I hear the Steelers are very interested in Mario Cristobal, the coach of the University of Miami. I think Mario Cristobal actually would really translate to the NFL. I watched his practice in the spring. The way that Mario coached that team reminded me of what old school coaches used to do. Now, when it comes to a guy like Mario Cristobal, guys, I think that he's definitely, tough. I think that he's definitely an older school type of coach. He's definitely somebody that has a presence to him. And another thing to keep in mind is that he apparently is a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So, I think that if he makes that move from Miami, where he is very happy right now, to the National Football League, it would probably be for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'll say this, man, if he ends up getting an interview and he ends up getting the job, he fits the brand of this football team and the toughness of the city, the blue-collar nature of the city and the football team like an absolute glove. He would understand what this job would mean to the city, all that different stuff. And, he has that bite to him that, Bill Cowher had and Chuck Noll had and Mike Tomlin had, where he commands the respect of the players in his locker room. Now, he seems like a bit of a tyrant, and that usually doesn't fly super well in NFL locker rooms with as much as players are making nowadays. But, I think that if it's going to work anywhere, it would work here in Pittsburgh with Mario Cristobal as this team's head coach. Now, I've said this about Marcus Freeman. I've said this about Dan Lanning. I've said this about all the college coaches that have been linked to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I really question a college coach's ability to build a staff of NFL coaches, okay? And the college football and pro football, very different games, all right? The hash marks obviously are closer together at the professional level. They're further apart at the college level, so it's much more of a horizontal offensive game than a vertical offensive game like it is in the National Football League. And, usually you want to get NFL coaches, to fill out your staff. And if you're in college football and you're filling your staffs with college coaches and you're connecting with college coaches, I just don't know if he has the resources coaching-wise to build a really good staff here in Pittsburgh, and that would be my main concern. I think Cristobal would have the culture and the leadership thing down, but I think a big part of being a head coach in this league that, frankly, Mike Tomlin wasn't all that good at is building a really good staff, and that would be my concern with any of these college coaches potentially coming over to the Pittsburgh Steelers head coaching job. But Josina Anderson, who did have the scoop on Mike Tomlin months ago, said the Steelers are still internally reviewing other names on the market for their head coach vacancy before whittling their list. A league source said early this morning. That was posted yesterday, by the way. So it seems like the Steelers could still be trying to, cast their net and maybe try to bring in some more people for interviews. And maybe that's just referring to Chris Shula and Nate Scheelhaase of the Rams because they can't interview them this week because they're playing on conference championship weekend. Or could they potentially be looking at a Mario Cristobal? Could they be still trying to get Marcus Freeman, who a lot of people have identified as the quote-unquote perfect Steelers coach, to go away from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish? Freeman says he's staying there in South Bend, but he's certainly somebody that I could see maybe pulling a Nick Saban and after saying, I'm staying here in Notre Dame, coming over to the NFL and being the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't say that would completely shock me if it happened. But predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will the Pittsburgh Steelers add any more candidates to the interview list before they hire their next head coach? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. Right now, I could see it going either way, guys, so let me know what you guys think down there in the comments for today's pinned question. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Ethos. Well, I'll tell you about Ethos today. Simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comments. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Ethos. And guys, the summer before I started here at Chat Sports, unfortunately, my family lost my late grandfather. And as you tend to do when you lose someone close to you, you begin to think about your own mortality and what would happen to the people dependent on you if something were to happen. With today's sponsor, Ethos, your family can be protected. If something were to happen to me, I want the last thing the people I love to worry about is being able to pay the bills, so I trust Ethos to keep them protected. And as you probably already know, however, the process for obtaining life insurance can be super confusing or straight up annoying with how tedious the process can be. That's where our friends at Ethos come in. As of March of 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance fast and easy to protect your family's future in minutes, not months. There's no complicated process, and it's 100% online. There's no medical exam required, and you just answer a few health questions to get a quote in as little as 10 minutes. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos today. Get your free quote at ethos.com/NFL Daily. That's ethos.com/NFL Daily to get your free quote today. Application times may vary, rates may vary, and a big thank you to Ethos for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. Now, it certainly seems like the people of Steelers Nation have spoken, and, a lot of people want Chris Shula, the Rams defensive coordinator, to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and personally, I would be 100% down with a Chris Shula hiring, and the reason for that is that Shula, frankly, has one hell of an impressive resume, okay? Like, this is somebody that I think is extremely qualified to be a head coach in the National Football League, at least based on his coaching experience and what he's done, especially recently as the defensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams. All right, he has been a position coach at every level of the defense. He came over with Sean McVay all those years back when McVay first took the job with the Los Angeles Rams. So he's learned under McVay and has seen how McVay has run that Rams organization for a number of years now. He's also helped develop a very young and inexperienced defense there in Los Angeles as their defensive coordinator. He took over when Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald left the building, all right? And then he brought in a bunch of these 4th and 5th and 6th round players and has turned them into legitimate NFL starters in that Rams defense, and has turned some players like Jared Verse into legitimate star players on that Rams defense as well. And then also he's got obviously the connections to the Sean McVay offensive coaching tree, which is all the craze nowadays, and it certainly seems like the Pittsburgh Steelers want a Sean McVay style offense here in Pittsburgh under this next regime, which would certainly give Shula a leg up versus some of the other candidates in the pool. And just to show you guys, what this defense has done under Chris Shula over the last 2 seasons, it's been a borderline top 10 defense. And this is with the least expensive group in the league, with a lot of mid to even late round draft picks playing lots of snaps in this defense, and, really developing some really young talents like Braden Fisk and Jared Verse and a lot of these guys that they have brought in, and even revitalizing older players' careers like Cam Curl, who was done in Washington, then goes to LA, has a complete career rebirth with the Los Angeles Rams. Now, just to show you guys the Shula era and what they've been doing in terms of the advanced analytics these last 2 years, last year actually wasn't as good. 23rd in EPA per play allowed and 25th in success rate. But then this year, obviously, they take that next step up where they're top 10 in both EPA per play and success rate. You combine those 2 years together, and over these last 2 years, this group has been a top 10 unit during the Shula era. Now, a lot of people ask me, but Jack, what does this defense look like schematically? Well, let me kind of break it down for you guys, all right? It's a 3-4 base defense, just like the Steelers have run for many, many years, okay? They actually play a lot of base. They're right up there with the Steelers with, playing the most base in the National Football League, so that would be something that a lot of these players are used to. Also, it's a match-based scheme, so lots of cover 4, lots of cover 6 and cover 8, and all these things that you see around the National Football League, but I think Shula find some really creative ways with post-snap rotations to utilize those match coverages. He also runs more dime than the average defense. I think they actually lead the league in dime, which is 6 DBs on the field. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. But not a ton of blitz. They actually like to walk up a ton of people at the line of scrimmage and then drop players out, which is called a simulated pressure. They only send 4, and then they like to run stunts, all right? And I think that's a really smart way to run your defense because you can maximize the amount of people out in coverage while also scheming people open and getting some free rushers and, using the power of your defensive linemen to get other people open to get to the quarterback. I think that's a really smart way to handle defensive football, and those sim pressures that I talked about where you have everybody lined up at the line of scrimmage, then drop out of it. Stuff we've seen guys from like Brian Flores and Mike McDonald and all these guys that like to do these, sim pressure looks. Chris Shula likes to run them there in Los Angeles, and it's led to some success, especially this season. And then it comes to the offensive coordinator shortlist that he would be bringing to the table. I mean, he's worked with a lot of, the guys that have worked under Sean McVay over the years. So Mike LaFleur, the current OC there with the Los Angeles Rams, could make a lateral move. McVay has allowed LaFleur to take a different OC job in the past. LaFleur was the offensive coordinator before, and then he took the Jets offensive coordinator job in the past. So I could see McVay allowing LaFleur to be the OC here. Also, Nate Scheelhaus, who's also interviewing for the Steelers head coaching position, could be on the short list as well. Wes Phillips, who was on the Rams staff that won the Super Bowl back in the days, the son of Wade Phillips, the legendary defensive-minded head coach, currently the OC in Minnesota. Dave Rigoni, the current QB coach in Los Angeles, would also be in consideration. And then Shane Waldron worked with Shula in Los Angeles back in the day as well, in the early years of the Sean McVay era in the City of Angels. So, I think that certainly the offensive coordinators and all that stuff in the resume all looks good. Now, I would say the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause when it comes to Shula is the history of defensive coordinators under Sean McVay getting head coaching opportunities hasn't exactly been great, all right? It first started with Brandon Staley, who got a head coaching job after they won the Super Bowl all those years back, and he was supposed to be the future of defensive football. Like, people were talking about him and his, 1.5, gap run defense and all that different stuff, and the two high safeties as the future of defensive football, all that different stuff. And people were calling him the defensive Sean McVay. That's what people were calling him at the time. So this guy had a ton of hype coming out of LA to go to the Chargers, who, by the way, hired him on the spot. He had so much hype around him. They didn't want him to leave the building. And then, he didn't even make it 3 years with the Los Angeles Chargers. He got absolutely panned for one of the worst playoff losses in playoff history, one of the biggest comebacks ever for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then, they had like Super Bowl expectations every single year with Justin Herbert and what was, what everybody thought was a loaded roster, and they did not meet expectations at all right? So that was the first one. And then Raheem Morris, the guy that took over for Brandon Staley, ends up, getting hyped up a ton as well, because they had some very successful years defensively there in LA under Morris's tenure as DC. And then he goes to Atlanta, and like Jalen Ramsey's calling him the best coach in football, and Mike Tomlin saying he's the best head coach without a head coaching job, and all these different things. And people are really, really excited about that hire as well. And then he gets fired in Atlanta 2 seasons after, all right? So I just think that there's a little bit of a thinking here that if you've even shook hands with Sean McVay, you're going to be a great head coach in the National Football League. And I think it's a little bit of a logical fallacy that people can fall into, where it's like, oh, you coached under Sean McVay? Let me hire you as my head coach right now. Some of that magic must have rubbed off on you. Pause. But no, okay? I truly believe that coaching is an individual's business, all right? Sure, you can learn certain concepts and things like that from coaches, but there's a reason why the Belichick tree never materialized. Everybody failed in the Belichick tree because everyone tried to be Bill Belichick, and there was nobody that was really a special individual that got a job outside of that regime, maybe outside of Brian Flores, who is probably the best defensive coordinator in football right now, but he got fired as well in Miami. So, I think that, when it comes to hiring a head coach, you got to find a special person, all right? You don't want to find someone with necessarily a special head coach that they've worked under, or, theoretical offensive coordinators they can bring in. You want to bring in somebody that you think can lead your organization in the correct way, and is somebody that's a really impressive individual that can give your team a competitive advantage because of who that person is. Now, to be completely clear, I'm not saying that Chris Shula would be a bad hire. In fact, I would love to hire Chris Shula. All right, I think that, like I said, he's got an awesome resume, all this different stuff, and yes, the offensive coordinator, people that he's got connections to are very impressive as well, and that is the style of offense I want to run here in Pittsburgh. I would like a Chris Shula regime here in Pittsburgh. But what I am saying is that if you hire Shula, don't hire him just because he's a McVay defensive coordinator, all right? Make sure you're hiring Shula for the right reasons, and that, you love his skill set as a coach, and you love the way that he teaches, and you love his experience, and you love his scheme, and you love, the staff that he can build, and you love his leadership ability. Those are the things that the Steelers should be focused on. I think if you're focused on the fact that he's an assistant under Sean McVay and that he's got all these connections to OC candidates and all this different stuff, I think you're probably looking at the wrong thing when trying to find a new head coach. And my advice to the Pittsburgh Steelers is hire the coach that you believe to be special, somebody that you think can stand in front of your players in that meeting room and in that locker room every single day and before practice, before games, and can rally the troops and can really be that leader that everyone can look to. And even when adversity strikes, everyone can buy into the program, buy into the culture, and buy in to each other and play for each other and their head coach every single Sunday. And guys, if that coach is Nate Scheelhaase, if that's the guy and that's like the next Sean McVay, where not only is he a great and innovative offensive mind, but he's also a terrific leader, then I think you hire him instead. Now it would be awesome to have Shula and then Scheelhaase as OC, but like if you believe Scheelhaase is that special head coach candidate, and that's what we should be looking for, whoever's the most special candidate and the best coach should get the job. And if that is Scheelhaase, based on your interviews and all those different things, and if he's your guy, you should hire him instead. Because if you hire Shula and you have Scheelhaase as the OC, but he's the better coach, and then you have success on offense with Scheelhaase calling plays, he's going to get poached, and you're going to be stuck with the lesser head coach in Chris Shula. Theoretically, of course, if Shula is your guy, Shula is your guy. But if Scheelhaase is the more impressive candidate, he should get the job, period. And another guy that I don't think people should be sleeping on right now is Anthony Weaver, who is going to be coming in tomorrow to interview for the head coaching position here in Pittsburgh. And by the way, he's the only candidate that is getting a second interview, at least at this point in the process. Mike McCarthy, Brian Flores, they had in-person interviews, but they skipped the virtual interview step because the team was already familiar with those guys. But with Weaver, he's the only guy that had a virtual interview that is now getting an in-person interview, at least right now. Now, I would probably expect Shula and or Scheelhaase to get a second interview in person whenever they're allowed to do so. But Weaver is definitely a candidate that I think, as the former defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins, like he is known as that, that strong presence, leader of men type of guy. And, when it comes to a guy like Art Rooney, when they asked him, what's the number one thing you're looking for in your next head coach? What was his answer? He said, I want a leader that can stand in front of our guys every single day, and they can be motivated, and they want to play for that guy every single day. Kind of similar to a guy like, say, Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions or Mike Tomlin, like we just had here in Pittsburgh. And, when I listen to people talk about Anthony Weaver as a coach, former players, John Harbaugh, who used to be his head coach there in Baltimore, they talk about him like he is the next Dan Campbell. And I think that, when Campbell was hired, a lot of people kind of poo-pooed it, said, oh, he's never called plays. Oh, he's just this kneecapping, knee-biting idiot, all these different things. He's a meathead. And he has turned into one of the better culture builders in the National Football League, and players love playing for him, man. And that's one of the best cultures in the league. And people talk about and compare Anthony Weaver to this guy. And if you can get anywhere close to what Dan Campbell has done in Detroit here in Pittsburgh, that's going to be a culture that players want to play for and with, and that is something that I am interested in if I'm looking for the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And honestly, man, with Weaver's dynamic personality, with the way that he lights up a room, when he steps into a room, you know it, man. He is a big individual. He's a former defensive lineman in the National Football League. He's got that kind of booming voice, and he knows how to use it, man. If you listen to him talk about defensive violence and putting your helmet under somebody's chin strap, like this guy knows what the AFC AFC North is about, and he talks like a player because he used to be a player. So I think that this is somebody that could win Art Rooney and Omar Khan's heart, especially in the in-person interview. And something to keep in mind, guys, is that when Mike Tomlin got the job, the Minnesota defense wasn't all that great, all right? Like Miami's defense wasn't all that great this season. But what got Mike Tomlin the job here in Pittsburgh was his dynamic personality and his leadership ability, and Weaver's exactly that type of guy. So if Tomlin got the job in 2007 because of those qualities, I would not be shocked whatsoever to see Anthony Weaver become the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers for the same reasons. Now, before I go here, I know today's already been a pretty long video, but I do want to handle some last few items here before I say goodbye for today's program, guys. First things first, the Ratbirds have their new head coach. They have hired Jesse Minter to be their next head coach. Obviously, he used to coach under Mike McDonald there and the defensive coaching staff back when they had their success on defense back in 2023. So he is back in the AFC North, and frankly, he's a little bit of a bitch. So welcome to the AFC North, Jesse Minter. Can't wait to beat up on you 2 times a year, my friend. Now, to finish up today's show on a little bit more of a serious note, Ryan Shazier put out a really lovely expose, a letter, a public letter, whatever you guys want to call it, to his former head coach here in Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin, as a goodbye to Coach T. And I just think I want to share it with you guys because it's absolutely amazing. He says, 2 decades of leading this organization with an unshakable belief and a standard that never wavered. Coach Tomlin, you changed my life in ways that go beyond football. From the moment you drafted me, you saw something in me and pushed me to be great. Those late night film sessions, just you and me grinding through defensive schemes when everyone else went home, that meant something to me. When you did what you did in that hospital room, holding linebacker meetings from my bedside, never letting me feel alone for a single second, that's when I realized you weren't just my coach, you were family. You kept me on the roster for 3 years while I fought to walk again, never once made me feel like I was anything less than a Steeler. And then this year, when I didn't know what was next, you brought me back home to your coaching staff. You believed in me again. You gave Pittsburgh 19 years of unwavering leadership and never compromised on what this organization stands for. Thank you for seeing me when I was 21. Thank you for holding me up when I was 25 and couldn't move my legs. Thank you for giving me purpose again at 32. You made me believe. And guys, when it comes to a guy like Mike Tomlin, maybe he had his shortcomings in terms of how he coached this football team and built this roster and all those different things. I think all that is all fair and well. But I think if there's anything that the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers can take from Mike Tomlin is how he treated his players, how he treated his staff, and how he built a community, a player-focused community here in Pittsburgh. And the players that played for Coach Tomlin will never forget what he means to them in their lives. So if I can say anything to the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, it would be to emulate that. So that'll be it for today's show, guys. I greatly appreciate you guys for sticking around to the end of the show. I know it's a little bit of a longer one. We'll have more Steelers content for you guys tomorrow, so make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.